Dozens of Brazilian agricultural students are packed into a lecture theater. They're here for a guest speaker who has been invited to talk to them about climate change. In many parts of the world, students studying for such a degree could expect to hear about the reality of rising global temperatures. But here, they're being told the opposite. The message of today's speaker is that climate change is not real.
O tal do efeito estufa não funciona, exatamente isso que a gente mostra na palestra, né?
The so-called greenhouse effect doesn't happen. That's exactly what we show in the lecture.
This is Ricardo Felício, a meteorologist who teaches at the University of São Paulo. He's a media-friendly academic who is no stranger to the limelight. His delivery is well-polished, but his message is more conspiracy theory than hard science.
Os objetivos são congelar os países em desenvolvimento. Então o Brasil é o principal.
The goal is to freeze developing countries. Brazil is the main focus of these operations that involve the environment and the climate. The idea of climate change is to stop our development.
For Felício, climate change is a plot invented by foreigners to stunt Brazil's growth. He's promoting his views on an 11-day lecture tour. Today's stop is in the state of Mato Grosso, the biggest soy producer in the country. The tour is sponsored by a trade association that represents the sort of people who might benefit from more farming land being created by deforestation. But it's not just agribusiness who wants to hear what Felício's got to say. He's been invited to speak in the Brazilian Senate, and his many fans on social media include Jair Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil himself, and his sons. Worth checking, wrote Bolsonaro, when he tweeted a video of Felício again denying the existence of man-made climate change. I'm Juliana Gragnani, and this is BBC Trending. In this special series, we're looking at how disinformation and denial are hindering the fight against catastrophic climate change. The overwhelming majority of scientific opinion agrees that bold, decisive action is needed right now to cut emissions. And yet, despite all the evidence out there, efforts to tackle climate change have been caught up in an information war, one that is taking many shapes and forms around the world. For this episode of The Denial Files, we're in Brazil, where climate change disinformation is thriving, while good and credible information is being undermined, even by the country's own president. All of which is having potentially deadly consequences for one of the world's most important regions, the Amazon rainforest.
Ouvi aqui no sindicato.
I heard it. I heard it here at the union.
Soy farmer Ilson Redivo caught Felício's lecture on a local stop of the tour. He owns a 10,000-acre farm in Sinop, which sits south of the Amazon rainforest. 2/3 of the area where the city lies has been deforested since the 1950s. Like Felício, Redivo also rejects the established science on global warming.
É uma narrativa, minha jovem. Isso aqui é uma narrativa.
It's a narrative, young woman. This is a narrative they preach, right?
Redivo very much enjoyed Felício's lecture, he told me. As well as being an academic, Felício has also previously stood unsuccessfully as a candidate for President Bolsonaro's former party. I've made numerous attempts to contact him to ask if he would speak to me, but I received no reply. So I approached the Association of Soy and Corn Producers in Mato Grosso, the organization which sponsored Felício's tour. Its vice president, Lucas Beber, told me this.
Coisa muito relativa, né? A mudança climática, ela não existe.
Climate change is a very relative thing, right? There is no certainty around climate change. If we listen, there are several opinions.
I was struck by how, like the soy farmer Redivo and the meteorologist Felício, Beber spoke about climate change as a narrative instead of a scientific fact. Beber said that the association had wanted to show students a different view to what appears in mainstream media. Other farmers I spoke to in Brazil said similar things and claimed they felt unfairly targeted by environmentalists.
Eu volto a frisar e colocar é que o Brasil é exemplo.
I would like to emphasize again that Brazil is an example to the world in terms of environmental preservation. And we feel hurt by the way we are treated. The Brazilian producer is the guy who preserves the most.
That's a reference to the Brazilian Forest Code, which mandates that farm owners in the Amazon must preserve the native forest on 80% of their land. Many farmers think that's unfair. In practice, however, studies have shown there are loopholes in this legislation, which allows for less preservation.
Quem mais prega, né? Hoje que o fogo
Who is
cruzado
preaching
vem da
that
onde?
we
Vem da
cannot
Europa.
deforest?
Certo?
Who preaches? It comes from Europe, okay? The truth is, they don't want the growth of Brazil. It's an economic narrative, not an environmental narrative.
We had a back and forth about this. I asked him what would be behind such false narratives. It was all about the money, he said.
É interesse econômico, tá certo? O que move o mundo?
Economic interest, that's right. What moves the world?
But when I asked him who would be behind such a conspiracy, he answered with a knowing laugh.
Quem são essas pessoas?
João.
Oh, Juliana.
He went on to make vague references to world rulers and people who wanted to exploit the Amazon for their own purposes. Brazil is the world's largest exporter of soy and beef, and in the coming years, demand for both is predicted to rise. Currently, much of it is going to China. Brazil is home to 2/3 of the Amazon rainforest, which is the most vibrant habitat on Earth. But in recent years, fires to clear land for agriculture and ranching, as well as mining, have had a devastating effect. Last year alone, an area roughly the size of Jamaica was deforested. Trees suck in carbon, and the Amazon rainforest has an important role in the planet as a carbon sink, absorbing carbon dioxide. Yet, according to research published in the journal Nature earlier this year, significant parts of the forest are now emitting more carbon than they are able to absorb. And last year, another study suggested that as much as 40% of the Amazon is at risk of switching from rainforest to open savanna with fewer trees. The message is clear. The Amazon rainforest and its role in helping us combat climate change could be reaching a tipping point. Redivo is unconvinced.
Eu estou há 30 anos aqui, foi desmatado monte.
I've been here for 30 years. There was a ton of deforestation, and the climate remains the same. There was no climate change.
Views like Redivo's that dismiss the environmental impact of deforestation and blame global power struggles instead may sound conspiratorial. But in Brazil, these views are not just popular amongst farmers, they're spread and amplified by those at the very top of government. In the summer of 2019, President Bolsonaro was asked by foreign correspondents about new data which showed an increase in Amazon deforestation. In his response, Bolsonaro made it clear that he thought foreigners should stay out of what he viewed as Brazil's affairs.
Primeiro, você tem que entender que a Amazônia é do Brasil, não é de vocês.
First of all, the Amazon belongs to Brazil, not you.
He went on to attack the scientists who had produced the data and claimed they had a hidden agenda.
Eu acho até que, aprofundando os estudos, ver se por acaso essas pessoas divulgaram.
I think that, further investigating, we'll see if people published with bad intentions disinformation to damage the current government and tarnish Brazil's image.
So who were these people with bad intentions? Well, the Brazilian government's own scientists.
The data of INPE showed that there was a tremendous increase in the deforested area in the Amazon. The president was very, very upset.
This is Ricardo Galvão, the former head of Brazil's National Space Research Institute, otherwise known as INPE. Since the 1980s, the institute has been using satellite and radar technology to measure and help prevent deforestation in Brazilian rainforests. It's funded by the Brazilian government, and the data Galvão was referring to showed an 88% increase in deforestation compared with the same month in the previous year. President Bolsonaro went on the attack, accusing INPE's leadership of being unpatriotic and of acting on behalf of foreign NGOs.
Some bad Brazilians dare make campaigns with lying numbers against our Amazon. This has an impact in the whole world.
So that was a very, very serious accusation. I decided to stand up. And what was clear for me that I would lose my job, that I would be fired. But I thought that was very, very important to bring to the news the real data, show that the government was completely wrong. And so I did.
The very public row led to Bolsonaro sacking Galvão, who had worked at INPE since 1970. How did you feel when you were removed from office? Did you feel angry?
No, I felt sad. I felt very, very sad, not only for me, because for Brazil. The first time of the history of INPE that happened. But I felt sad for the Brazilian science and for INPE. Since the beginning of the government, I was always suspecting that something like bad could happen, but not of that dimension, not so serious.
And do you think this government is a climate change denier?
Definitely.
I approached Bolsonaro's office for comment, but they didn't respond. In the wake of the INPE crisis, several scientific institutions, including the Brazilian Academy of Sciences, defended the agency and the accuracy of its data. One of the organizations building on INPE's work is MAP Biomas, led by Tasso Azevedo, a former head of the Brazilian Forest Service and a climate change consultant. MAP Biomas is a coalition of environmental groups that monitors deforestation in the Amazon and tries to identify how much of it is being carried out illegally. Azevedo says data from INPE is vital to their operation.
What we have is an attack on science in general, right? It's like disqualify the science so you can actually invent anything.
Earlier this year, President Bolsonaro promised to ensure Brazil reaches net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But environmentalists say that Brazil is actually going backwards. Bolsonaro has also promised to end illegal deforestation by 2028. And at the COP26 conference, Brazil is one of more than 100 nations who have pledged to end all deforestation by 2030 and to even work to reverse it. That commitment has also been met with deep skepticism from activists. President Bolsonaro has also said that despite budget pressures, he intends to strengthen environmental bodies and double the funding for inspections. But the political opposition and environmentalists such as Azevedo have accused the government of doing the opposite, cutting resources, dismantling inspection bodies, and reducing fines for environmental crimes.
There is this issue that although we monitor the deforestation, very little action is being done with the findings. And every week we are putting out an average of 1,500 reports that indicates whether this deforestation really happens, when it happens. And also you check things like, for example, if it's over protected areas, if it has an authorization or not. So ultimately you can understand if it's something is legal or illegal. And this process, for example, allows us to identify that over 80% of every single deforestation detected in Brazil in the last 2 years, they have elements of illegality. If you look at the level of penalty that you have on the different offenses related to deforestation, it's all declining. So we don't have like the political will and the resources being applied to actually seize this problem.
Under the current administration, INPE's budget has been decreasing. Galvão fears that this will damage its ability to monitor deforestation. He is worried that in the future, the agency will not have the satellite network it needs to do its work properly. The other big concern is replacing INPE's aging supercomputer, which produces sophisticated models of climate change.
So Brazil would have to buy a new supercomputer. That's known even before Bolsonaro's government. That was very, very important to do that. Nothing was done, and now the INPE does not have a computer to run these codes with the efficiency that's required to provide relevant results.
INPE's current management say that they are waiting for funding to replace the supercomputer. But in the meantime, they're installing equipment that may partially take over some of its functions. But environmentalist Tasso Azevedo fears underfunding will have an effect.
By cutting all the resource for development of science, we are actually creating a problem for the country in the long run, because we will be lacking the development that we need on the long run.
The future of climate science in Brazil looks uncertain, but the government continues to link the issues of the Amazon to national pride.
In this
21st century, one of the biggest issues threatening sovereignty is sustainability.
That's Brazil's Vice President, General Hamilton Mourão, speaking last September in a webinar about the Amazon organized by an NGO connected to the military. He defended efforts to end illegal deforestation, but like President Bolsonaro, he made it clear that other countries' interest was unwelcome.
Quando a gente vê discurso de líderes de outros países se referindo a problemas da Amazônia,
when we see speeches by leaders from other countries referring to problems in the Amazon, it is a form of intervention. The next step is propaganda, as we see happening in the international community today, with negative propaganda about the Brazilian Amazon.
The Vice President's office told the BBC he bases his ideas and opinions on scientific data. As the world comes together in Scotland to talk about how we can reduce emissions, Tasso Azevedo and his colleagues have published new data that suggests in Brazil things are going the wrong way.
And the striking fact is that the emissions grow 9.5% between 2019 and 2020. It's the only country from the biggest economies that actually increase emission while everybody was decreasing emission. The reason for that is because of deforestation.
And yet, despite this, Azevedo told me that even in the face of challenges, science and scientists persist. He believes that Brazil has an opportunity to turn things around. The science is telling us how it can be done. It just requires the political will to back them up.
If we can control deforestation, our emissions would drop down very fast. If we control deforestation, there's no country in the world that will have a lower emission proportionally than what we have in Brazil. So I think that's an opportunity for us. It's not that we have to fight in every single battle again. If we focus in one battle, which is fighting the deforestation, we will have an incredible result for Brazil and for the planet.
That's it for this episode. My thanks to producers Kaylin Devlin and Jonathan Griffin, series producer Vibeke Venema, and our editor, Ed Main. Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with your thoughts on this or any of our other episodes, you can email me, Juliana.Gragnani. That's GRAGNANI @bbc.co.uk.